Beyond the Forbidden.
That's just one tiny example of corruption, though. You know what I mean? Because I guarantee that's what I don't think they're going to ever ban the vaping, but that's what's going to happen. Like if they do, they're going to ban all the mom and pop companies. That because there's hundreds of them, man. There's a bunch of them, and then they're going to have because I guarantee you, I don't know the numbers, but I guarantee a lot of these tobacco companies are taking a huge hit, and they're the ones behind the scenes lobbying with certain politicians to pass laws, you know.
Yeah.
But that's not just with the tobacco, that's with every industry. I remember growing up, man, we used to have so many freaking phone companies, which I didn't have a phone until my senior year in high school. I think it was my senior year in high school. But I remember there were so many phone companies, so many internet providers, and just now that all these corporations, they just buy them up, consume, and you either get this piece of shit or you get this other piece of shit, so you don't have a whole lot of things to choose from anymore. But Jerry, enough of me rambling, man. That kind of just, I don't know, my mind just, when I see corruption, I just get pissed off. But I don't know. But Jerry, like I said, this is the one. I first came across you on the Veritas radio back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Been a while.
I've been doing podcasts since 2010, but I came across your interview with Mel on Veritas. I think your show came out like in 2011, but I think it was 2011. But I think I listened to that podcast that you did with him about probably 12 or 13. But so we're going to have a newcomer. I know all about you, Jerry. I've listened to a lot of interviews, and watched videos of you. You're all over the internet. Just people just need to find people can find you if they search. You've been doing a lot of research, a lot of expeditions. But first off, over the years, you've been doing a lot of work. But first off, I guess let's lay the groundwork for everybody who's new to you. Where can people find you, your websites, and all that, Jerry?
Yeah, sure. Well, there are two main websites. The first one is the website that I use for folks who are wanting to request a healing or find some information. And that would be simply jerrywills.com, WILLS, jerrywills.com. The other website is where I do what you're doing. It's called Jerry Wills Show. Just add the word show to the end of that. jerrywillsshow.com. And like yourself, I have a passion for doing broadcasting, and it's a nice alternative to working with folks. I get to go into an entirely different genre and reality by doing it that way. So jerrywillsshow.com has really hundreds and hundreds of videos and audio tracks and all this stuff. It's a membership site. There are some things there that are free also in the special broadcast section. But yeah, that's the two websites.
Yeah, with the broadcasting, I've been doing it on and off since 2010. I've interviewed a lot of people that's not with us anymore. But what years later would be Beyond the Forbidden. Because I was first Cryptic Knowledge Radio back in the day. But with interviews, and I'm sure you can relate, Jerry. It's a way to detach from the world. It's almost like a self of mental hygiene to talk to like-minded people or people I don't even agree with, but I want to listen to their story. It's because a lot of people, especially here in the South where I live in Louisiana, the Bible Belt, and friends and family, they're not into these topics. Either because my show's on conspiracies, the paranormal, ancient mysteries, the occult, the supernatural, cover it all. I'm basically just like coast to coast, but I'll say shit down and everything else I want to. So
yeah, me too. I'll smoke on air. If they don't like it, tune out.
Old school. But yeah, it's just a way because a lot of people just aren't And we're going to get into your story in just a moment, but we always hear about this awakening process, right? People's waking up. Yes, I agree. And I know back in the day that you talked about 2011 and 12, that was a pivotal point for, maybe you can go into that a little bit here in a moment, but that was a way for something happened where people are waking up, you know. But can you hear me, Jerry? On your end.
There wasn't any on my end, but that's fine. I'll just put the headset back on.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's
But
easy.
I want to get me a headset like that too. I want to get like the old Pilot, the the old World War
Yeah.
II, Pilot headphones.
That'd be fun.
But there's a awakening process going on, yes, but I just don't think it's large enough. Whatever topic it is, whether it's about government corruption, the paranormal, UFOs, and all that. How do you see the awakening and disclosure now, as of back in the day when you were looking at all these topics, Jerry?
Yeah, good question. Back, let's say back in the day, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe even. But, folks were very, there were folks who were very interested, not everyone, because always, you have that even now. But you had folks who were very interested. They were hungry for information, and whether it was about fairies or demons or ghosts or UFOs or cryptids, someone sees a Bigfoot or a dinosaur or whatever, these folks were, there were little camps of people interested in all these different kinds of topics. And they were saying even then, someday people will wake up to this. Well, we've had really quite a significant disclosure with, with UFOs from the military. And I think well before that ever occurred, there was enough information where people would actually, they'd have to be brain dead not to know that there are UFOs and extraterrestrials and some very strange things happening. Folks like David Pilates was bringing new pieces of information about, and this had to do with strange disappearances. So, information just keeps rolling forward. But when you have the world today, I don't know, there are people in, my general age range who are still steadfast, and they're still saying, we need more disclosure and so on. Hell, I don't know how much more disclosure you need. I mean, not only are people seeing them, but the US government is saying, oh, well, they're UAPs. Well, leave it to them to come up with some new acronym. They're still UFOs. But then you have, within the camps of the younger generation, let's say anywhere from 25 and older, so 25 to 40, let's say, about a 15-year range. There are still those who are just like we were when we were that age, and still curious, still interested. And because there's so much information now, because the internet has just exploded, and there's just a terrific level of information being dispersed, well, they're still saying the same things. We'd like to have a great awakening. We'd like to have more information. I don't think we'll ever have so much information that we don't wish we had more, first of all. And as far as a great awakening goes, it, to me at this point, and I'm 70, so I've known all the greats, and they're gone. And I've seen a great many people who are frauds, and I've seen a quite a number of people who were the real deal. And I don't know. I mean, the way it is right now, there are now pretty divided into two camps. You have what I call the political camp, which are the ones who are the ones walking around with their iPhone or their Android in their hand, kind of stuck to it, and they're all involved in glitz, glamour.
Do you want to help support Beyond Forbidden and receive extra content that's not seen anywhere else? By becoming a patron, a few things you will receive are the full length 90-minute or 120-minute podcast episode. Members will also receive a private link of the video podcast and will only be exclusive to Patreon members. In-person, face-to-face interviews with some of the most well-known, respected researchers, behind-the-scenes footage of interviews not seen anywhere else, and that's just a few perks. So what do you have to lose? Cut out one brain-rotting, overly processed Happy Meal a month that doesn't do anything beneficial for your mind, body, and spirit, and become a Patreon for just $5.
Political and just, a bunch of things that don't even interest me.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the other camp who are sitting here listening to your show, my show, and other shows like ours, who are hungry for more information. And I think it's within that camp the Great Awakening occurs, because it isn't a Great Awakening on a societal scale. It's a Great Awakening on a personal scale. And because of what you're doing and I'm doing and others like us, there's some out there who are inspired by the quality of what we do. So I can tell by your what I see here, you've got a terrific level of quality. You've paid attention to that, and your information should mirror that. And I think it does. So we're inspiring another generation to pick up the banner and march it forward in their own way, using us as the inspiration. And that's the Great Awakening, in my opinion. It's that we're giving those who are interested a reason to look a little deeper, go a little farther, and to bring the information forward. Because let's face it, the places where we get information are not always reliable. And to be able to get good, solid, detailed information, that's what makes a difference. And we're waking people up one at a time. And the more people that do this, you see, the more people they reach, and so on, until there's a great, huge mass of people who are just sitting there waiting for the next piece of information, or they have information and they're compelled to come forward and deliver it. And then, of course, there are that small number that'll invest in the equipment and have it setting up, and they'll go on air like this and say, guess what, folks, here's the next shoe that's just dropped.
Mm-hmm.
As far as a Great Awakening on a societal level, it hasn't happened in thousands of years, because there's no real reason for it to happen. And I believe that this is because there are too many distractions. There are a lot of people with a lot of interests, and everyone thinks their interest is the interest to pay attention to. So there are really too many distractions for it to be on a societal scale. The only thing that'll change that is if there is something that is an impending, perhaps threat, or something so challenging to the current belief structures that everyone has to sit up and take notice and then reevaluate their placement in all of this on a societal scale. Until something like that happens, though, I don't think it's going to be that the society in general, humankind, is going to sit back and go, wow, okay, now that's a whole new thing. And it's just really given me a reason to quickly develop a new perspective. And that's what the Great Awakening is. It's a new perspective, really.
Yes.
That's my opinion.
Well said, Jerry. One thing that I see is you have a younger crowd, like I was when I'm 37, but when I was in my early 20s, starting my podcast and research and all that, you have this younger crowd that's very ambitious when it comes. You see them on Twitter, you see them on YouTube, and we need that. But like I said a while ago, I just don't think that it's large enough. But I don't think anything will change until the corruption in DC and politics gets changed. That has to change, because you're not going to have any change with the same minds that created all this bullshit and begin with. It just keeps getting passed on and passed on in DC and politics, these career politicians, and you always hear disclosure, Great Awakening slash disclosure, and all that. I know you've heard it for a long time. I have too. But we, as long as those same bureaucrats, as long as they are in power, the elites, whatever name you want to give them, I don't think they're going to. I hate to sound like I'm a pessimist, because I am not a pessimistic person, but we're not going to get that. I don't need disclosure. I know, you know what I mean. But I'm
Yeah.
talking about like disclosure to where all these advanced technologies that's in the black world, that they come to the forefront, where they're public knowledge and people like you and I can use them. Cancer, treatments for cancer, but not treatments, cures. That's what all they're doing is treating the symptoms. That's where the money is. And that kind of disclosure, all these advanced technologies and things like that, and just like throw everything out on the table. I don't think all that will happen, as long as these same people that started 9/11, that brought our good old boys to Vietnam War, because those same career politicians, they were grandfathered in DC, and some of them lasted in DC that were in Vietnam up until probably now, or few years back. Well, I know Biden, I think
Yeah.
he was in politics back then. But nothing will change unless we get rid of all that corruption, and I think we just need to start over, and I think get rid of everybody. You know what I mean? Everybody, and just start with a clean, fresh slate.
True. Oh man, you've hit the nail on the head. The just like this UAP
I was just about to
disclosure.
ask you about that too. Yeah, I'm glad. See, you're reading my mind, because I was want to kind of go into that too. So,
Well, when you've got something happening they're putting out in front of you, it's because they've got something back here they're hiding away they don't really want you to pay attention to. And they're going to be putting things out there, so that you're like, wow, look at that. And you're right about the career politicians, the entire, well, I don't know if I can't say about every politician, because some of them seem to be okie dokie.
well, yes. Well,
But
just like I was a part of the government, I was military. That doesn't mean me and other people like me were bad.
exactly. But by and large, I mean, these folks are just pretty goddamn nuts. They're just nuts. And I mean, people are waiting on them to validate what you should already know. And when I hear that, it's like, what the hell's wrong with you?
Mm-hmm.
You're relying on somebody who is a pathological liar to validate what you should already know.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this whole, man, we could go off on a huge tangent talking about government and bullshit like that, because I have my own axe to grind with all of it. The only interest I have in it is that it affects my life, and just like it affects everyone's life, whether it's the brain dead idea of electric vehicles, or the 15-minute cities, and things happening like, warehouses left, right, and center burning down, with food in them, but they're a specific kind of food. They're wholesome food. I mean, all these things going on, and they want you to take a look at, decided to let you know that, yes, we have alien bodies. Yeah, there's another agenda. You're not looking for the other agenda, because, of course, it's pretty well hidden. But they want to keep the Goombas dancing. And as long as the Goombas continue dancing, you can weave around them and get on through. That's a reference to the Super Mario Brothers movie from years and years ago. So yeah, I mean, folks are looking for validation on what they think and what they believe. I think if you're waiting for validation to come from the powers that be, then you're just not really thinking very clearly. Get validation from people who are experiencers. If you believe them, swell. If you don't believe them, go somewhere else. But, get validation by being in a community that is, right there with you, looking and wondering and look and trying to find answers. There are a lot of people looking for Bigfoot, and there's plenty of Bigfoot tracks. And there's plenty of Bigfoot reports, but they have to have a body for it to be real. I ran into a situation kind of like this craziness many years ago. I met a guy named Rich while I was in Peru. And this was back when, I don't know the year, it was in the early 90s, but it's when Barbara Marciniak first released a book called Bringers of the Dawn. And here in Phoenix, and I'm sure it must have been elsewhere too, there were a lot of people who suddenly, after the book came out, they were either Pleiadian or they channeled the Pleiadians. Everything was Pleiadian. So I meet this guy named Rich, climbs up on the bus as I'm going up the mountain to Machu Picchu out of Agua Caliente. And there's a bit of a backstory. I put out a message, a few months earlier while I was in Peru. I want to talk to somebody down there who's an extraterrestrial. I let it go, and nothing ever happened. So here I'm on top of the bus. And the reason I'm on top of the bus, by the way, is because that's the safest place to be. This bus was really rickety. So if it's going to go over the cliff, I can jump off. If I'm in the bus, that's the end of me. So I'm up there riding along. The bus stops just as we pass the Urubamba River. So you have to go over this bridge. And this guy gets on, talks to the driver, comes around, gets on top of the bus, comes up, sits across from me. We're hanging on to the rails, as we're going up there. After a little introduction, he knew my name. And we started talking, and he let me know that he's a Pleiadian. So it's like, oh, brother. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine. You're Pleiadian. Nice to meet you. And that's what I told him. I said, yeah, sure you are. Good for you. Well, he got a little bit of a hurt look in his face. Says, no, really, I am. And so we continued talking. Well, as it turns out, he really was. There were things that happened later that afternoon, and then for the next 5 years that, led me to know conclusively he was who he said he was. But anyhow, the point is this that I'm trying to get to. So I'm kind of going in a long way around it. When you have proof of something and people are wanting validation, even if it's right there in front of you, you're pretty inclined not to believe it because the world is full of a lot of tricksters and bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of folks, that just closes their mind. They're always skeptical. They're always doubting. And because of that, I think there are times when folks actually miss out on real opportunities. It's something amazing. So, for the folks out there who want to have some validation, it's probably nearby. Take a chance on it.
And a while ago, you mentioned something about certain, or there's some type of agenda at play. To paraphrase whatever you was talking about, what type of and of course, there's probably many at play that we could choose from when it comes to the UAP nonsense. I like the old, UFO term.
Me too.
But What do you think? If you had to guess, what was your gut tell you? If you had to pick one that you think this is it, what agenda is going on with these hearings, with this disclosure talk, and these congressional hearings in DC and all that? What do you think is coming down the pipe with all that?
Well, what do I think that it's going to end up being? Is that your question?
That, and or what will happen with all this? What, when anything come from it, will there just be more money that they're asking for to put space laser or more space lasers in orbit, or whatever, space weapons, or defense money? What's their card, the threat card? What's going to happen? What's up their sleeve with all this that's going on?
Well, I believe it's the threat card. Reagan said it pretty well when he said that the thing that would unify the entire world was a threat from beyond this world. And, that's a rather substantial and poignant observation. Where do I think it leads? Well, it's really hard to say. And I don't want to be, a negative Ned about all of it, because I think there's some truly remarkable and positive attributes. But when you have people in power who are pathological, then fill in the blanks, and they're the ones that are controlling the flow of information and providing it to you, you have to kind of figure out the type of people that are feeding you the shit to figure out what kind of shit it is. If they're giving you information to make you look that direction, they're building it up for some reason, and it isn't for your best interests. On the other hand, I know, not believe or think, but I know that there are beings here who, one group, let's say one civilization, they don't care one way or the other. They're just sort of observing and watching and just, paying attention. This is a poignant time in the history of this world, because there are things that are coming in the future that is going to be quite remarkable and very destructive. So they're watching. They watched last time it happened, 12,000 years ago. And they probably watched when it happened 12,000 years before that, and so on. There's another group of people that believe that we are a part of who they are, and indeed they are, that are interested in trying to, I don't know, I wouldn't say direct, but kind of point the way so that we might get a new perspective, a different way of thinking, or perhaps increase our ability so that we might make better choices, and to do it in a non-overt way. So they have a legitimate concern to try and help. They're beneficent, but they're not like, don't worry, no one's going to hurt you, or we're going to take them out. It's not like that. At least not from everything I've been told and everything that I've seen. And then you have another group or two who think that this is a farm and it can be harvested whenever the hell they want to, and they do. And that has to do with women that have abduction memories, and they're pregnant, and then they're not pregnant, and people abducted and they have scoop marks or little trackers or whatever the hell in them. That's not a beneficent group of people, and these are all people in their own context from the stars, but this is not a beneficent group of people doing that, and they've been doing that for a very long time. Now throw into the mix the powers that work on this world as part of this world, and they're looking at, how do we manage this? How do we make sure we're okay and we survive and we can benefit somehow from this? And so deals are made, agreements have been reached, and It's no different, really, than when Eisenhower met with the quote unquote Nordics. Rich was kind of a Nordic. I've met with those who would call that classification as Nordic. So when Eisenhower met with them, it was like, let's have a cooperative time. We can share knowledge. We can meter it out so it doesn't interfere with the development of your world, but can also benefit your world. And Eisenhower was truly more interested in weapon systems because of the Cold War with Russia. Well, these folks, the nice guys, we'll call them, they wanted to work with every nation on this planet to bring everybody up to a given level and teach everyone how to live in peace and how to do things cooperatively. Oh no, those damn Russians. So another group comes in. They're a bit more nefarious, and they make agreements and concessions. There were agreements made with the good guys too, but not of a huge substantial nature. Sure, you can be here and, in a non-interfering, rather passive way. But the other guys, the bad guys, show up and say, sure, we've got some weapons for you. They'll never be able to touch you with this. And the next thing you know, agreements have been reached. The U.S. gets weapons. They think that the other people are not getting weapons, but that didn't work out so well. And then when these bad guys, we'll call them, started doing things that was outside the agreement, like abductions, well, we've got weapons, but we don't have weapons that can even remotely touch them. So it was a bit of a screwy deal in that respect. So how that plays out now in today's world, well, it basically is not that much different. There are still good guys, bad guys, and indifferent that are here. And they're still doing the things they're doing. And as long as, the people who desire control over others and the power here maintain their posture, then these bad guys can just keep on doing whatever the hell they're doing. And the good guys that are here makes it very difficult for them to do anything. And I think eventually the scenario is going to play out in order for there to be a common enemy, that they're going to make it immediately obvious that there are people here who look like people who live on this world, and they're insurgent bad guys. And you better watch out for them, because it's those people that offer the greatest sense of threat to the actual bad guys to continue doing what they're doing. And it just makes the people in power on this side of the equation for humans even more powerful. And it throws scare and panic into everybody. And if you're scared and panicked, you want the government to protect you.
You won't act rational.
Exactly. You can't act rational. You're a veteran.
Yeah.
You get into a situation that's just damn dangerous. You're either going to be rational and think through what the hell you're going to do and have a plan immediately, or you're doomed. Well, people are not brought up in a way anymore. They're not shown that this is how you actually conduct your life. You figure out what's going on and then make rational decisions. No one does that. And as a result, it makes everyone very easy to control.
Exactly. When we're in a constant state of fear, we're more easily controlled. Hence our our vibrations and frequencies, they're on a lower level. And that we just keep going. It's like a hamster wheel, it's this dichotomy that we live in. But you're talking about these factions. So I know you've been doing broadcasting for a while. So I feel like you kind of wanted to segue. I feel like you kind of spun it how I was wanting to go, or you just read my mind. You might be read my mind. But I guess because we're going to have new listeners. I know you probably get tired. maybe not. Maybe not. I might if I was you. You get tired of saying the same stories and all that. But then again, you always want to have new listeners. You got
Yes,
newcomers.
absolutely.
So, and I guess the road's yours. The steering wheel is yours. Where do you want to go back? You want to go back when you were dropped off, kind of go back to the beginning, and then we can segue into some other things after we kind of get some more groundwork for those who are unfamiliar with you and your story, and then we can take a veer off on another path and go down that road too.
Sure. Well, I don't usually make any grand gestures towards my origins unless I'm asked, and it surprised a great many people whenever they did ask. But I'll give you a thumbnail sketch. There's no point in going into incredible depth with this. And I should preface it by saying, for those who aren't familiar, if you feel that this is a bunch of, crap, then, I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm telling it because this is what I know, and it might hold some relevance. There might be some information for you. If it doesn't, then tune it out, disregard it. I arrived to this world in 1953. I was brought here by some of the same people that I ended up being in contact with for a great many years. I grew up in the hills of Kentucky. And in 1953, when I was dropped off, that thing I was talking about with Eisenhower, well, that was part of the arrangement. That they were going to bring children here, and they were going to be in touch with the children, monitor the children, help the children. So, I was dropped off. The Army Air Corps, there was no Air Force at the time, but the Army Air Corps out of Fort Knox, Kentucky, retrieved me about 12 hours later than they should have. I was near death. Took me to the Fort Knox Military Hospital, and I stayed there until suitable parents were found for me. And then there were adoption papers, I suppose. Something was drawn up, and I was provided to this Army guy and his wife, who was sterile, couldn't have children. And that's where I remained until I left home. At about 12 years old was my first major sighting of a UFO, but I had visitations because I lived with my adopted parents in Denver, Colorado for 7 years. And during that 7-year period, there were multiple occasions that I recall where there were Air Force brass that showed up, because now there was an Air Force Academy just 70 miles away in Colorado Springs. I think it's about 70 miles. So Air Force brass and other military would show up, come to where I was living, and they would be checking in on me. About once every year, there was a trip down to Florida, and this trip to Florida ended up going out into the swamplands. In Louisiana, be like the bayou, take a boat, go back. And then there was a military encampment back there where my uncle Sam, that's what I thought his name was at the time. I don't know who the hell he was, drove a big old black Cadillac. Anyway, he and my dad would take me out there, get on a boat, go down this, into these trees quite a ways. And we ended up in military camp. Soldier would give me a stick of gum. I'd chew it. It was juicy fruit. I loved juicy fruit at the time. And then I'd pass out. The next thing I know, I'd wake up back home, and it's time to go for breakfast and pancakes. So, but about 12 years old, because my father died when I was 7, we moved back to the hills of Kentucky. And when he died, there were some pretty, significant looking Air Force dudes and men in suits that showed up. They were going to take me from my mother and they weren't able to, fortunately. Moved back to Kentucky, and I grew up there. And then I had a few interesting experiences off and on, and then the major UFO sighting, and then nothing for about, I don't know, 8-9 months. And then I met up this fellow down in the forest. His name was Zoe. I was a little over 13 at that time. It was in late spring, my 13th year. And started off talking, and it ended up being telepathic. And that continued until I was 18. And then at 18, they taught me a lot of stuff. At 18, they don't want to go out into the world and be like everyone else, blend in. Well, hell, I was living on a farm far away from anybody, no shoes in the summer, and it was pretty wacky. But I got off the farm, left home, figured out what it means to have a job, and I blended in. I learned how to drink, I learned how to smoke, I learned how to cuss, and I learned what it means to be a human. And some things are not worth doing, like the drinking. For some reason, I don't like drugs of any kind, pharmaceutical or otherwise. I don't like drinking. If I try to drink, it just plows me. I mean, can you imagine drinking half a beer and you're just sitting there with your eyes kind of rolling back in your head? You're wanting to fall over like a drunk chicken. Well, the only thing that really stuck with me was I just love coffee and I love a cigarette. I don't chase women. I don't chase cars. And I don't spend any money at the racetrack. I just work on people and I just enjoy life this way. So anyhow, got out into the world, and the next thing you know, I discover what it means to be living on this world in a whole new context. Hell, who'd have thought you had to pay for water? That was a new one.
Well, we're the only creature on Earth that has to make money to survive.
Yeah. It's an enslavement system is what it is.
Yep.
But the whole world works that way, and you can't really change it if everything works like that. So anyway, got a job. When I was 19, I was working because my IQ was apparently quite high. They made me take the damn IQ test 5 times. And every time they had me take it, it got higher. They accused me of cheating. So they sat there and watched to make sure I wasn't cheating. Well, anyway, I was an oddball in high school. I had a photographic memory.
And you're 6'8", right?
It is 6'9". I was only 6'6" then.
Good Lord.
And so I had a vocabulary that was unparalleled. I had to actually talk in a very dumbed down way to communicate with everybody around me.
That's how I feel when I'm talking to friends and family around here, when it comes to all these topics, conspiracies, paranormal, and like kind of you have to dumbify it. You have to dumbify it because you start talking about all these, Eisenhower treaties and reptilians and, talking about 75%, of planes hit, or all the planes on 9/11 hit 75% of their targets, all because of man in the caves in Afghanistan with a laptop and a computer. Come on now, get real. You start talking like that, and so everything, all these things that we discuss or we talk about, with I guess the truth community, I guess, you just get chastised, especially down here. I don't have a whole lot of friends, but the ones I do have are very loyal though. They may not agree with me, but they'll do anything for me. If I have a body on the side of the road, hey Joe Blow, I need some help, man. All right, where you at? you know, like I got some really good friends,
Yeah.
but they're very few and far between though.
Well, same here. And I think when you're in this particular genre, you end up with that kind of occurrence in your life. But I now have, I never really tried to find any. Hell, I don't have anything to sell. I'm not trying to capitalize on this in any way. The only reason I do shows like this is because you asked me to be on. I don't get anything for this. It's just I want to because I think it's worth doing. But anyway, there are people like, oh, well, you make a mint off this. Or, no, you're thinking of David Wilcox, not me. I have nothing to sell. I make nothing from doing this. But you end up with a community of people around you.
I like his teeth, by the way.
What's that?
I said I like his teeth, by the way. Said no one ever. I'm talking about his. Right.
Well, you might notice I've got one missing. I had to break off about a month ago, and I've been to the dentist and getting an implant. See?
Oh yeah. Well, I didn't see it until you said something. But the reason I mentioned his teeth,
you can't help but see it.
the reason why the reason why I mentioned his teeth is because, man, I don't know. It's like I thought he disappeared off the map.
England?
I don't know where he's from. No, I don't know, but he disappeared off the map, and like I don't know, it seemed like forever. He came on one interview. I don't know. I tuned in. I was like, holy shit, his teeth are white and shiny, and I'm like, damn, But then you got people like Corey Good, and that he just said under, I guess, oath or whatever it is. What was it? Some kind of hearing. I forgot what they call it. Having a Biden moment. Anyways, he pretty much said he's never been to space, and he basically made it all up. There is no, it's all part of his intellectual property, blue chickens and all that.
But when I was over at Gaia TV and he was like one of their stars, Jay Weidner was asking me what I thought about it. And I just told Jay flat out, these guys are frauds.
They're full of shit.
I know what the truth is. Yeah. So I know what the truth is and the things you're talking about. Believe me, as many hundreds and hundreds of hours conversations that I've had, either inside or sitting outside of a UFO and talking to multiple civilizations, no one's ever mentioned any of this shit. This isn't true. So you're perpetuating a fraud by endorsing these folks. Well, I don't think so. Blah, blah, blah. And as it turns out, Jay Weidner was coaching them on how to tell the story and tell it with great enthusiasm. That none of it was true. So that's just my opinion, but from my own knowledge base. But gee whiz, I don't know. Like I said, there are tricksters out there, and unless you know, how would you know? And the only way that I know is because I've been there, done that. So yeah, I kind of know. But it still doesn't mean that I know everything. So sure as hell don't. I know some things.
So everybody listening, Jerry, he's just given not even a piece of the pie when it comes to his background and story. His story is everywhere out there. You can go check it out. Just do a little bit of searching. You'll find he's all over. He's just given like a cliff note of a Cliff Notes version of his background. But one thing I did want to bring up, I don't know if you're at the age of 13, 12, 13, 14, or something like that. You're terribly sick. You're almost about to die.
Oh, hell yeah. I remember that.
Go ahead and explain that, because I found that story quite amusing.
Yeah, we were
in a good way. In a good way.
Yeah, it's a very different thing. Because we always rented. My mother remarried, and he And she then moved out to the farms, and that's why I was growing up in the hills of Kentucky. And they were tobacco farmers. Well, that just really gives you a backstory. We were living on Mills's farm, and this is, back a ways, quite a ways from town. And we didn't have running water. We had a pump. So you went outside with one of those 2.5 gallon pails, the type, and you pump it full of water and you carry it in the house, and you have a ladle, and that's where you get your drinking water from or use it for cooking or whatever. This was in October, late October. Hell, it might have even been early November because I don't remember the dates exactly. I'd already been in contact with Zoe and the others. So I was probably more like 14 when this happened. So I've been in contact with them for at least a year.
Before you tell the story, sorry to interrupt you, Jerry. Was he more like of a Nordic? Because I believe that I've heard you say he was human like, very human like.
It was like a person. Yeah. I even saw him walking around in town 1 or 2 times I ever went there. But he looks like a person, except when he showed up with the UFO, or the first time in the forest, way down in the forest. He's in a one-piece, what we would now consider a Lycra bodysuit, but there was no such thing then. It was just a tan colored outfit. It went right up to his wrists like this, tightly on his body. I couldn't see any zipper anywhere. That first time I met him, it was hot. You know how it is in Louisiana in the summer.
Oh yeah,
it's just hot, steamy, and you outside, and you're just sweating profusely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here he is walking towards me, and he's got this thing on, and he's not sweating at all. He had kind of dark sandy colored hair that was just touching his collar. And hippies were pretty popular at that time as far as a culture goes. It was an emerging thing. And I never met a person I couldn't talk to. And I'm sitting back there waiting for my friend Randy. So he shows up, starts talking to me. Well, anyway, back to the story about when I was 14. The thing is it was getting cold. And I guess, the mice were looking for shelter from the cold. It already had a couple of good freezes. And this was a hand dug well, went down probably about 20, 30 feet. And you put, prime the pump, you start pumping it, and water comes out. You never look down in it. Well, been drinking water, and I drank a lot of water, and pumped up the remains of decayed mice, bones and flesh, putrefied. And I showed it to my stepdad, and oh my God, we've been drinking this water. Well, they've been cooking with it. They didn't drink a lot of water, but I did. And it was right about that time that I got just sick as hell. And it just got worse. And doctor checked me out, came out to the house, and basically just a country doctor, wasn't anything fancy. And said basically I had typhus and something else, but I had a bad fever and just sick, just in bed. Well, when Zoe would call out to me to come down to the woods to meet up, I would hear this high-pitched beeping noise. It was kind of like Morse code, but even though I learned Morse code, it was so fast I couldn't figure out what it was. Just like, a series of beeps and stops, series of beeps, sometimes louder, sometimes not so loud, kind of like it's floating on the wind,
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I'd call out to him with my mind, let him know I was on my way. Well, this particular time, the beeping happened, and I'm just laying there and just sick as hell. And then a few minutes later, beeping happened again. And I just projected a thought with my mind, which I'd learned to do at this point, that, I'm really sick. I think I'm going to die. Well, the beeping stopped, and I just sort of passed out. I really had been sick in bed for 2 or 3 days at that point. Next thing you know, I'm laying there in my underwear, just, underwear, no shirt or anything. and feverish. Well, middle of the night, I was jarred awake by the cold. And I just sort of opened my eyes and looked around. Well, I'm on some kind of a rectangular metal looking thing. It wasn't uncomfortable, but the air was cold. And there wasn't like bump, bump, bump as you're being walked across someplace, just floating. And where I was at, I could kind of look and see off to towards my feet, left and right. There was two beings there I'd never seen before. They were about 5 foot or so, maybe a little taller, I'm guessing. Kind of a bluish white color, kind of looked like that guy off to your right. Not exactly, but similar. And I kind of looked off to my other side to the right. It hurt to move my head. And I saw there was somebody else there, and I figured there's somebody else on the other side, so 4 of them. So as I'm going along, and I'm going feet first, I can see that there is one of these UFOs, the flying saucers, sitting there under the power lines just out there in the middle of the field. And then up to the right, there's another one, and I'm guessing, 20, 30 feet off the ground, a little bit further back. And then another one up above the power lines, even farther back. And it's just black night. And yet I could still see these things. And there's a light that opened up, like a door just came open. And I just closed my eyes. I just wasn't well at all. And next thing I know, I'm laying I must be inside of one of these, this one that was right in front of me. And I'm still on this metal thing. It's not uncomfortable, but I could tell it's metal. And I looked up above my head, and I never saw anything like it. Now I know what I was looking at. If you can imagine, like a 6 foot tall, I don't know, 5 foot tall, but it's like a plasma TV, like, an LED TV, the flat panel.
Mm-hmm.
It was about, it was a little wider than the bed I was laying on. And the bed I was laying on was wider than my shoulders, but probably by about that much on each side. And it was, again, about that much wider on each side.
Do you want to help support Beyond Forbidden and receive extra content that's not seen anywhere else? By becoming a patron, a few things you will receive are the full-length 90-minute or 120-minute podcast episode. Members will also receive a private link of the video podcast and will only be exclusive to Patreon members. In-person, face-to-face interviews with some of the most well-known, respected researchers. Behind-the-scenes footage of interviews not seen anywhere else. And that's just a few perks. So what do you have to lose? Cut out one brain-rotting, overly processed Happy Meal a month that doesn't do anything beneficial for your mind, body, and spirit, and become a Patreon for just $5.